A PowerPoint slide that gives keys to success for testing strategies and test anxiety. Title page slide reads, Keys to Success Series, Testing Strategies and Test Anxiety. Quote, no single test score can be considered a definitive measure of a student's knowledge. End quote. From the National Research Council report, High Stakes. Next slide. Midterm and finals week. Start studying a little bit each day now. Spaced studying is better than massed studying. Next slide. Study, study, study. There is a positive correlation between the amount of time spent studying and test scores. If you increase your study time, then you should also increase your test score. Next slide, a study skills recap. Maintain a regular sleep and eating schedule. Keep your stress to a minimum. Put off big decisions and changes. Try to prioritize. What is coming up next? Have a good study place. Make sure you have supplies, good lighting, and a place that is free of distractions. Next slide. Some strategies for test anxiety include being well prepared for the test. This is the best way to reduce test anxiety. Try to space out your studying. Maintain a positive attitude while studying and taking the test. Get a good night's sleep the night before. And try to eat breakfast and/or eat right before your test. Next slide. Some testing strategies to help manage test anxiety. Allow extra time and arrive to class early on your test day. Bring the supplies you need. Review the entire test before you start. For example, how many questions, what type, and the pace that you need in order to manage your time limits. Jot down your thoughts in the margins or on the back of your test. Next slide. More testing strategies for test anxiety. Make sure you carefully read the directions. Answer easy questions first. Skip the questions you do not know and come back to them. Answer all the questions. Look for keywords and phrases. Look elsewhere on the test for answers. For example, in a different section. Next slide. For test strategies, dealing with anxiety. Stay focused. Do not let your mind wander. Do not worry about how fast everyone else finishes. If you do have time, go back and check your work. Make sure you answered all the questions. Make sure both your first and last name are on the test. Next slide continues with strategies for test anxiety. Make sure you get help ahead of time through tutoring. During the test, if you feel yourself starting to panic, take several deep breaths, collect your thoughts, stay focused on finishing. Remind yourself of the worst case scenario. For example, failing an exam does not mean you will fail the class. Or failing in class does not mean that you will fail out of college or that you are a failure. Remember, being a student is just one role in your life, not your whole life. Next slide. If you must cram, here are some techniques. Eat food, but avoid sugar and caffeine. They may make you too hyper to study. Focus on main ideas and learn key formulas. Do not try to memorize everything. Write down key points and ideas and study from what you wrote. Study from past tests, review questions, homework, review sheets, etc. Take at least a 5-minute break on the hour. Try to get at least 3 hours of sleep. Do not forget to set an alarm and a backup alarm. Tips for true-false tests. There's usually more true answers than false. Guess. You have a 50% chance. Read each statement carefully. The words never, always, and every mean the statement must be true all the time. These are usually false answers. The words usually, sometimes, and generally mean the statement can be true or false depending on the circumstance. These are usually true answers. If any part of the statement is false, then the entire statement is false. Next slide. Tips for multiple choice tests. Read the question before looking at the answer choices. Try to come up with the answer in your head before looking at the choices. Eliminate answers you know are not right. If 2 answers seem right, pick the best answer. Go with your first response. If a choice is none of the above, look for a true statement or 2 false statements. If a choice is all of the above, look for a false statement or 2 true statements. Next slide. Tips for short answer tests. Study with flashcards. Study what the instructor emphasizes in class. Do not leave an answer blank. Guess or at least write down a thought. Come back to questions you do not know. Make sure you answer everything the question asks for. Tips for essay tests. Read the directions carefully. Make sure you know if you are to answer all the essays or only a certain number. Write down everything the essay asks and more. Get as detailed as you can without rambling or repeating. If the question asks for facts, do not include opinion and vice versa. Write as neatly as possible. Make an outline beforehand. Don't write long intros and conclusions. Spend time answering the question. Focus on one main idea per paragraph. Budget your time. Proofread and correct your errors if possible. Next slide. Tips for math tests. Practice, practice, practice. Repetition is key. Make a sheet of formulas and memorize the formulas on the sheet. When you get the exam, write down formulas in the margin. Read the directions carefully. Show all your work. Make sure you copy down the problem correctly. Check your work if time permits. Next slide. Tips for open book tests. Beware. Spend an equal or greater time studying for an open book test as you would a closed book test. The open book test will likely be harder. Familiarize yourself with the book and any materials. Highlight important points and use post-it notes. Bring everything you are allowed to use, handouts, notes, etc. Answer the questions you know of off the top of your head first, then go back and answer the questions you need to look up. Last slide. Good luck on your exams. Questions, comments? What strategy or tip will you use on your next exam? Thank you for listening to this PowerPoint presentation on test strategies for test anxiety.